So triphasic training is the strength training style that I like to use, that I like to promote. Cal Dietz is actually a wrestler at the University of Findlay. He's 5 or 6 years older than me. I think he's, like I said, probably 46 or 47. And he's the strength coach at the University of Minnesota. He has a book that's called Triphasic, a system that's basically called Triphasic. But it was developed of French contrast. French contrast training had been around for a lot longer of a time period. And so Cal's idea was basically that, if you look at, strength training, plyometrics, sports, whatever it is, you can basically break it down into 3 phases: concentric, eccentric, and isometric. You have the concentric phase where you're creating force. You have the isometric phase where you're stopping or holding the force. And then you have the eccentric force, where the force, or using a lengthening motion to absorb that force, right? And so during that change of direction, he realized that basically that the isometric phase was actually the most important part of the phase, because we needed to have that basically reactive and explosive changeover from going from the concentric to eccentric, or eccentric to concentric. That change of direction was the most important. And he started looking at his athletes and going, okay, this guy benches the same amount. We'll say it's 2 shot putters, right? This guy benches 405 for 5 reps, and this other guy is doing the same. They look the same. Their body fat's the same. They're pretty much the same size. They have the same anthropomorphic characteristics. Their arms are the same length. They're both 6'3", 250. One guy throws the shot put 10 feet farther than the other guy. Why? Right? So, and it's this ability to have rate of force development, right? To be powerful and explosive as you're changing direction, that makes the difference. And what he ended up seeing is that guy that benched 405, or the guy that could throw 10 feet further, could bend number of repetitions in a shorter time period than the guy that was weaker, or wasn't able to explode and wasn't able to get that shot put out. Does that make sense? Right? So it uses this idea of what's called post-activation potentiation, right? So this idea is that you have an increased muscle recruitment ability after you do some type of, close to maximal resistance type of exercise, right? Or some type. Is everybody back on?
Yeah.
Sorry about that, guys. I don't know what happened there. All right. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
And again, this is a big part of the conjugate periodization, right? Which is looking at filling up all of those buckets and working on all these different biomotor skills all at the same time, right? So what they saw during these studies is basically that you see a huge improvement every time that you add in this type of training, right? This is probably the most consistent way to see improvements in any type of parameter that you want to see from a biomotor skill through enhanced strength training principles. Is this triphasic French contrast periodization type of scenario or programming scenario? Do you guys have any questions about that at this point? And I knew that this is probably a new idea. So I'll keep going, right? So typically what you're going to look at is people are doing 3 to 4 sets, and these workouts are the following, right? Doing some type of heavy resistance exercise, low reps, looking at primarily weight training, maybe using something that's isokinetic, like the ISO machine, trying to get a lot of recruitment, then followed by something that's a powerful movement, right? The examples are plyometrics, again, some type of powerful explosive movement. If we're going to add resistance, we want to be between 30 to 40% of our 1 rep max, right? And this is going to be something that we're going to do within a 3 to 5 rep range. So again, this is almost more like a superset, right? Or circuit, or the way that you're doing it. There's no rest in between, and basically in between these exercises, then you give a big rest break. So basically they can recover, which we talked about before is what you want to do when you're working on pure speed or absolute strength type of training, or when you're really trying to get a specific result that's coming into your training parameters like this, versus, hey, I'm just trying to get kind of a calorie burn, a metabolic change, and what we don't big rest periods, because it's not going to be, you want to use that rest time to continue to work on the metabolic side of it. But when you're looking at these isolated parameters that you're looking for functional improvement, you want to give a lot of rest in between so they can fully recover and get back to the working set and give their all, basically, right? Or their optimal, whatever that, makes sense, right? So, and then the other thing that can be included in here that's not just, with those top 4 bullet points is eccentrics, isometrics. Oscillations are like pulsing, right? You can do it with push-ups. You can do all kinds of different oscillating type of movements, which really works on control and again, changing over really quickly from one direction to the other. You can use body weight. You can use weights. Like I said, this is one of the things that we typically use with the SuperCat for. Right, the SuperCat's a great way to do that because it decreases your risk as well from all the quick low to teach people how to get the form and the recruitment correctly. But a lot of times when you start doing this type of training, people do a lot of compensation, right? So giving them the ability to basically do these movements correctly initially is the most important thing, right? Which is something that we've talked about. With this said, I come back to it, right? The SAID principle, right? Specific adaptation to impose demands, right? Versus novelty. It's like, well, if you just look at what I just said, right? Doesn't it make sense that we're going to see pretty big changes with somebody, right? If you go from doing a regular training program to something like this, you're going to see a change, right? So this stuff here, from what I've seen over the years, triphasic and French contrast is the best guaranteed way to see big changes for somebody, whatever results that you're trying to look for them when it comes to strength training, right? So that said, though, I think that it's interesting because, is it just the novelty of changing this, or is it really specificity, right? So I just put that there as the last, principle to think about, of what's going on with this. As we get more specific with what we're doing, we're going to see more specific results. But also when we add novelty into the situation and change things up, we're also going to see improvements with that. The body's going to want to try to adapt, right? But novelty can be a little, or sometimes ultimately risky as well. We don't necessarily need to go skydiving, right? Just to do something new to change things up. It's not necessarily going to, equate to something beneficial, especially specifically.